Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good morning to you.
Morning, Andrew. How are you?
I'm okay. Like I just said to you, I pulled up the blind in my office. I've been living in a cave of darkness since Saturday lunchtime. I can see the sun, the sky is blue, but it means nothing to me.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a strange and unfamiliar world we're in right now.
Well, it is, isn't it? Because it's the first time in 18 games that we're having to talk about Arsenal losing. A defeat for the first time since the game against Liverpool, which was in, late August, early September?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not the usual routine for us or for the listeners or for anybody associated with Arsenal.
31st of August it was.
Right.
And if you thought an 83rd minute winner was cruel, Dominic Szoboszlai really had to hold Emi Buendia's beer on that one. Pretty cruel way to lose a football match.
Yes.
And those Arsenal players, they felt every inch of that cruelty, didn't they?
They really did. Piero Hincapié was only short of doing this as he slapped the turf.
Mendoza!
They felt it.
Yeah, it was full kind of platoon scenes, wasn't it? David Raya as well, I have to commend for his pounding of the turf.
Yeah, turf thumping.
I haven't seen turf pounded like that since I watched Saltburn. Yes, extraordinary.
I haven't seen that movie, so I don't know the reference, but
okay,
it's probably for the best from what I've heard about that film.
Quite disturbing.
Yeah, from what I've heard.
I think, they were all of us. I think in many ways.
I think so. It's just one of those things that when the ball hits the back of the net, it feels almost surreal in a way, as if it's not real. You know what I mean? It's like, no, that I can't have just seen that. It's not possible. Surely not.
When do I wake from this nightmare?
Yeah, exactly. I'm slapping myself in the face, going, "Come on, I don't like this dream anymore." Yeah, it's really, really tough, because
it's one of those. It's like it's a knife edge, right? And it's awful for us. And similarly, because my algorithm is baiting me, I get sort of posts from Aston Villa fans who set the Titanic theme music to kick in at the exact moment Buendia puts that ball in the back of the net. It's just one of those moments that's sort of like very dramatic, and in our case, kind of dramatically painful.
I think you need to take the algorithm out the back and give it a good kicking, to be honest, if that's what's being served up to you.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, listen, losing is bad. Nobody enjoys that. But losing in those circumstances, we've been on the other end of it plenty of times where a late goal gives you one of the best feelings that you can ever have as a football fan, which is to sort of just grab all 3 points or qualify for the next round or whatever it is with a goal that comes far too late for the opposition to respond. Sometimes there's a late goal and there might even be a couple of minutes left. This was like almost literally the last kick of the game.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if I remember many goals where, as far as I'm aware, we didn't see the game restart. Like, I think there were still replays of the goal when the final whistle blew.
I just muted my TV straight away as soon as the goal went in. It was hard enough listening to the commentary on TNT Sports. The last thing I needed was to hear them talk about that, because I knew there was no time. There was no way we could respond. And so it was like, I've got to lessen the evil that I'm experiencing by turning off the TV, or certainly muting the TV, because, I couldn't listen to the cheers and the commentary, none of it, which sort of added to the surreal nature of it, because you're sort of sitting there in silence, stewing over something that's pretty hard to take.
Well, here we are.
A couple of days later, the dust has settled a bit, so I guess we can try and make sense of it.
the picture's not too ugly, I don't think.
No,
now the dust has settled.
No, I wrote about that a bit on the blog today. So if people want to go and have a read of that, they can. And I think, there is plenty to unpack from this game. I think we might have a question maybe in part 2 about how people have reacted to it and try and explore that a little bit. But I do think a big part of it is just how it happened. If we played poorly and Villa had gone 2-1 up in the last, if they'd scored in the 60th minute and we hadn't been able to get a goal in the last half an hour, I don't think it would feel quite as bad, obviously. So it's the manner of defeat that really is playing a part in how we think about this. Because, generally speaking, I think it was a fairly even kind of game. I think maybe if you were going to say who had the more dangerous moments, who had the most dangerous moments, it would be Villa. Mm-hmm. But I think generally speaking, when you look at the SofaScore do this nice little sort of graphic, it's called attack momentum, and you can see the way that it goes between the two teams. And it's pretty even. They had a spell, we had a spell. They had a spell, we had a spell, particularly in the first half where I thought there were periods where both teams had to sit back and defend and be really disciplined. And there were periods, when we had the ball, when we were on the front foot, when Villa were on the front foot, I think we came up against a very decent team in good form. They're on a pretty good run, a very good run at Villa Park as well. And ultimately just kind of fell short right at the death. So, yeah, I don't know. Where do you want to start with this? On the team selection, I guess?
Yeah. What did we see? I mean, I have to be honest and say I thought William Saliba would be back for this. Was a bit surprised that he didn't make it. Not a good surprise. So Ben White played at right back, Jurin Timber at centre-half. I think that's quite interesting, that Mikel Arteta clearly sees those two that way round.
Yes. That wasn't a surprise to me because I saw it in pre-season last year when those two played together. It was always Timber at centre-half rather than Ben White. So
Yeah. I mean, they've both played a lot of football at centre-back. Timber maybe more recently has done so internationally and stuff. I think as well that he seemed to want Timber to be kind of jumping out of the back line at times, which maybe he's more suited to. Mm-hmm. Odegaard continued in midfield, which meant Eze coming in on the left-hand side. And Mikel Merino continued up front after his good performance against Brentford in midweek.
Yeah.
So they were the major decisions. I mean, I think intrigued to see Eze and Odegaard on the same pitch again. Intrigued to see Eze back on the left, how that might work.
Or not.
Not very well, I guess was our answer.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably the takeaway from the first half is that, the two players who came off at the break weren't really playing particularly well. I think Merino looked like a guy who has played a lot and run a lot in the last little while, right? And Eze looked a bit peripheral out on the left-hand side. I mean, people have spoken about moving him from the central area, which I understand because he's done well there. But also, I think you have to look at the team selection and look at who we didn't have available in terms of, what does the manager think about a game at Villa Park? Could he keep Eze in the middle and play Martinelli on the left? He could keep Odegaard on the bench. Maybe that would be something he'd be more willing to do if he had Saliba and Gabriel available to him. I think when you've got this, how do I put it? Not makeshift, because obviously they're both defenders, and Timber and Nketiah international defenders, but not a lot of playing time between them. So there isn't really a relationship there. So you're playing at Villa Park, which we know is going to be really intense. Do you add the sort of technical security of somebody like Martin Odegaard into midfield? And to me, that made perfect sense. And you want to keep Eze in the team. So do you view Eze on the left as a player out of position or just not in his optimum position?
Well, the first thing I would say is, he's been playing predominantly in that Odegaard role, and I feel like we've had debates and questions and discussions around whether that's the right position for him as well. There's been a lot of talk of he's over on the right-hand side. It's an adjustment for him. He's learning a new system. And prior to, obviously, his kind of explosion in the Spurs game, I don't think his performances had been especially good. I don't think they'd been bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think they'd been outstanding. I found it really interesting when, perhaps you saw it on the TNT coverage, but at one point, about halfway through the first half, they flashed up a kind of average touch map, I think it was, for the Arsenal 11. And it was so interesting seeing kind of White, Odegaard and Saka, almost as you would expect, as like a little triangle high up on the right-hand side, clearly playing close to each other, clearly combining. And then Eze, as tends to be the case with our left winger, was kind of an isolated dot way over on the left.
Yeah, that's not just an Eze thing, is it? Because that could be Martinelli, it could be Trossard.
Has been many times, yeah. And I think we've spoken before about how that hasn't particularly helped Martinelli, certainly. I think Trossard, of the three of them, is the one who's kind of found a way to make it work and to be able to combine and be involved from that area. So, yeah, listen, I felt like he was peripheral in a very literal sense. But I also feel like that is slightly a function of the way we play, especially when we have White, Odegaard and Saka on the pitch. We have tended to be very lopsided. And, there was a moment, wasn't there, where I think, did he score after Saka was offside and he kind of came in off that left-hand side? And I sort of think maybe that's more what we're looking for from him when we set up in this way. We're not necessarily expecting him to be a number 10 on the ball, regularly creating things from that side. Maybe it is more about arriving and getting on the end of stuff. But he was definitely peripheral. I thought Marino, it may have been fatigue, as you suggest. I just thought his touch, his hold-up play was not secure. He wasn't really providing the focal point that he can do. And as far as Eze goes, I think what he did on the ball was kind of much less important than what he did off it. And I think it might have been that really provoked the substitution, because obviously he was very, very... he was, as Slot would say of Konate, he was at the crime scene on
the goal,
Villa's opening goal.
Well, listen, we'll come to that now in a second, but just some other, you mentioned the disallowed goal that we scored. Yeah, scored but didn't score, obviously. There was a chance early on for Villa, wasn't there, when Ollie Watkins was through, and I thought he was going to score, to be honest, but David Raya made a good save. I think it's probably a bad miss more than a good save. I'm not taking anything away from Raya, but if you're a striker, my striker's in that position, he doesn't score, I'm looking at him before I'm giving any credit to the goalkeeper. But, there were moments, I think, at both ends without either side really dominating or looking like they were going to get ahead. I thought we pressed quite well, I must say, actually, in that first half hour or so. Like, there were a couple of moments where we created turnovers. I think one led to an Odegaard shot from the edge of the box. There's another moment where Saka ended up getting a shot off and then maybe a header as well. But I remember feeling like we looked quite coordinated and aggressive, and we were going after Villa in that first 20, 30 minutes or so. But yes, you're right to say the chance at both ends, and Watkins had the decent opportunity. Matty Cash had one at the back post that Declan Rice, I thought, blocked really, really well. Yeah, that was a great block from Rice. And it wasn't long after that they scored. So, look, Eze clearly knew he'd made a mistake, and it's not that he wasn't there, and it's not that he wasn't tracking back, and it wasn't that he was in the wrong position. It's just literally half a second, because you can see him scan and look around and see is Matty Cash behind him, and he's there and he knows what he has to do. It's just that he switches off. All it takes is half a second and Cash is there. Where I might also look at this goal is the time. I think it's Pau Torres who puts the cross in under no pressure whatsoever. I think he's looking for Watkins in the middle. It flicks off Timber, which is obviously beneficial for Matty Cash. He races onto it. You can see the reaction from Eze. He knows. He sort of slumps to his knees for a second, and there's a sort of reverse angle where I think you can sort of see him go, fuck, as Matty Cash runs off the back of him to make it 1-0 to Villa. So
you can actually. I'm just watching that now. There's lip readers will have a field day with that. Yes, they will conclude that what he's saying is fuck. I thought the same, actually. Do you know what? It reminded me a little bit of the way Sunderland were allowed time on the ball before their equaliser in the 2-2. You know, there was a lot of kind of seemingly quite passive play outside the box before they actually swung one in. But in that context, it was the 94th minute or something, and we had 5 defenders on the pitch, and you could understand. I think I'm right saying, including Saliba and Gabriel as well. You could understand us kind of saying, well, yeah, if you want to swing it into the box, that's fine. You know, we'll defend our lines. But I did think we were a bit passive here. We didn't get out to him, to Torres. He's given ages to sort of swing in across wherever he likes. And, you know, when we speak about injuries and how they impact us and affect us, I mean, Timber's a fantastic defender, but he is about half a foot shorter than William Saliba.
Yes.
And that might be the difference, genuinely, between getting that ball away or, as happens, flicking it onto the back post.
Yeah, and nothing Raya could do about it. And then you sort of have that little bit of momentum, or you fear that little bit of momentum is going to carry Villa all the way through to half-time. You're like, right, let's just get it in at 1-0. But there were chances for Arsenal before the break. There was one for Ben White, which I think you can see by the reaction from him as he takes the shot. You know, it's a first-time shot. Bukayo Saka pulls it back. First-time shot, and he has to hit it first time. He's got no choice. But you know, he sort of jumps up and down a little bit as if, crikey, you know, could have done a little bit better there. And then there was another one when Declan Rice, he won the ball. Did he win the ball? Yeah, he intercepted, got there ahead of McGinn, left McGinn on his big arse, and got to the edge of the box. And there's a pass maybe to Saka if he looks up, but the shot that he takes is quite tame. I don't know if he just ran out of steam or whatever it was, having worked hard to get the ball back. But there were a couple of moments there for Arsenal before the end of the first half where I think we maybe could have done a little bit better with. And then we get to half-time. Were you expecting a change at half-time?
Do you know what? I thought it was a possibility. What about you?
I did wonder about... Yeah, I wondered about Eze and I wondered about Merino. I didn't necessarily expect both to come off. I was worried for Eze. I'll say that.
Yeah, especially when you've got Leandro Trossard back and available, and he's been in such good form. You know what I mean? I think I can massively understand that temptation. I mean, just on there's a substitution. Like, what do you think the tone of that substitution was? Do you think that was a punishment? It's
hard to know, isn't it? It might be just the case that he looked at Eze and looked at Merino and said, it's not working. In this game, these guys are not as active as I need them to be. I've got to try and change something. It's hard to sort of escape that conclusion, isn't it? When a player makes a mistake that leads to a goal and then they get taken off at halftime, you put 2 and 2 together pretty easily. I mean,
I think all players, I sort of think regardless of the intention, you know, I'm sure if he was asked about it in public, Mikel Arteta would just say, well, you've got other options at your disposal, and, you know, one's a really informed player in Trossard, and it makes sense to use them and to change it. You've got to come from behind. But equally, I know how a footballer would take being hooked at half time.
Yes.
Whatever the intention, whatever the logic, which I think the logic is perfectly sound, to be honest. It would definitely have been a blow to us.
And ultimately it was a decision which paid off because of what Trossard did in the opening minutes of the second half. So, I mean, you can look at it as a punishment for Eze, but you can also look at it as a way to get the team performing again. I think in the, 7 minutes into the second half when we get the goal, is it that? Yeah. 8 minutes into the second half. He had a chance
even before that.
Well, he had two chances. Two chances. There was one where I think we had a corner and Emi Martinez came out. He hooked a shot on target. Oh, yes. Martinez got back. And then there was the brilliant pass from Odegaard over the top, which he volleyed not far wide with his left foot. Yeah. So immediately, whether it's Trossard, whether it's something different in terms of the way the team are playing, whether it's an instruction about, let's get Trossard into the game or not, he is instantly more impactful on that left-hand side than Eze was in the first half. So if the manager wants a justification for his substitution, it's like, I needed more from whoever is playing in that position. I brought on a player who gave me more and got the team back into the game with a goal.
And this was our best spell, I thought, really, of the game immediately after half-time. Villa sort of, disappeared into their shells a bit, and I thought we were really, really good and really dangerous. Trossard made a massive difference, was a real threat, as you mentioned, on several occasions, and we got the goal. Credit to Declan Rice, who won the ball back brilliantly. Odegaard and Saka, who were kind of really at it, I think, in this game at periods. They seem to be really enjoy having each other available. And there's Trossard doing Trossard things, getting on the end of it. Viktor Gyokeres is pretty close to it, but Emi Martinez palms it away. And, of course, it's Leandro Trossard.
You mentioned that sort of right-hand side, and maybe we're a bit lopsided, but, the right-hand side created a goal for the left-hand side player, so that's part of that that logic. And you're right, I think this was our best spell in the game.
I thought we were going to come back and win it, I'll be honest. I mean, I said
you
that
did
to
say that to me, yeah.
I was like, I think Villa are decent, but I think if we can really play to our level in the second half, I think it's very much still there for us. And when we equalised at 52 minutes, I thought, I am Nostradamus. I am the great and mighty predictor of football outcomes.
Yeah.
That lasted, some minutes.
Some glorious minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, glorious minutes.
I mean, I think, again, it's fair to say that after the goal, not that we sat back deliberately, but Villa actually responded quite well. The game got a bit more open, got a bit stretched, I think, at times. And there was something I noticed that I don't see happening at all when we have William Saliba and Gabriel in the team, is that Villa were looking for passes between the fullback and the centre half and getting some joy from that, which I thought was maybe something that either Unai Emery or Aston Villa had identified as a possible way of getting at Arsenal. There was, I think we made him, was it Calafiori played a bad pass, and then himself and Nkapie got back and they sort of squeezed out the danger. There was a chance for Ollie Watkins again when Raya made a good save. So I think what you're saying about Arsenal going on to win the game if we could play at our level, I don't think we did, though. I don't think we did play at our level. I mean, there were moments Martin Odegaard threatened, and Martin Odegaard looked good in the second half in particular, shooting. One shot in particular was very good. Another one maybe a bit tame, a bit straight at the goalkeeper. But he looked lively. I thought Saka actually looked pretty lively too, but he came off with a yellow card. But it was, the longer it went on, there was a Saka shot as well, wasn't there, that was going, I think, in, and it was blocked by Konsa. One of the defenders got it away. I don't think Emi Martinez was going to get there. He sort of side-footed it towards the far post, and it was a good clearance. But the longer it went on, the more I was thinking, I'll take a draw here.
Same.
I'd like to win it, but I will absolutely take a draw.
Like I said, I thought we had a very good kind of 10, 15 minutes after the break, but I thought Villa sort of settled back into things after that. And they do have a way of hurting us. You know, there are certain teams in this league. We're very, very good. I think we're probably the best team in the Premier League right now. But there are a few teams who can give us problems. Newcastle historically have been one, and I would say that Villa are absolutely one as well. There is something kind of quite
annoying.
Annoying, yeah, that's one word. I mean, they attack in a very dynamic way, basically. That is difficult for anybody to live with, especially a team shorn of their two first-choice central defenders. And players like Morgan Rogers, you know, we have struggled to shackle him before. I think he gives us issues. Yeah, I mean, Emi Martinez makes a really good save from that Martin Odegaard shot, but otherwise, I think the better chances were going Villa's way.
For sure, there was one for Malen, wasn't there? Daniel Malen, dragged wide, and then there's the Timber. He sort of gets a toe on it as Raya's about to come out and collect it, and it just sort of squirms beyond the far post. Almost an own goal, and those were the kinds of things that were making me think, just fucking get out of Dodge with a point, reset, and just sort of, okay, fine, a draw away from home against a team in good form. They've got the wind at their backs in terms of their form and the fans and the crowd and the energy. Just like, get out of here, take the point, get out of here. Nevertheless, I think there was a half decent chance for Arsenal to score a winning goal.
What, the Madueke moment?
Well, the Madueke moment and the Gyokeres non-moment, I would classify it as, because I think, he didn't really have much of an impact when he came off the bench. And I think, to be fair, he's only just back from injury, so we can put his performance in that context. But what I think, frustrated me a little bit was when discussions around Gyokeres happen, people will say, well, look, he's not going to be the striker who picks up the ball from deep and, makes things happen for himself. He needs service. And I absolutely accept that. Where I was frustrated with Gyokeres and latterly Madueke was the fact that this was brilliant service from Declan Rice. This was a fantastic ball in from the left-hand side. Gyokeres is nowhere near it. He's not reading that situation well enough. He's not on his toes well enough. He does not attack that ball in the way that I want my striker to attack that ball. And I think when it gets to Madueke at the back post, I think he's just got to go back across the goal, I know it's his wrong foot. I know it's not, not always easy, but I think in that moment, you've got to put the ball back across towards the far post. If the keeper makes a save, maybe Gyokeres is there, and to be fair, he is there in a central position, to tap home a rebound or to sort of slide in the way he did on Sanchez last week, to really attack it. So I think that's where I have a sense of regret above and beyond what happened immediately afterwards. I think that was a pretty decent opportunity for Arsenal to win that, because I know the ball in from Rice is quite early, as it should be, because that's how you make it dangerous. But I just don't know that our forward players did enough.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's almost like they didn't anticipate it, I think. And in some respects, I can understand it, because who thinks, well, I imagine Declan Rice will pull this out the sky with his right foot and then lay a left-footed cross perfectly into the 6-yard box. It's not a completely irrational position to take, but it doesn't look great, you'd say, for your centre forward. I'm a bit more sympathetic to Madueke in terms of like how tight the angle is by that point.
Sure,
on his weaker foot. I think there's a degree to which this moment is probably being over-indexed, over-scrutinised because of its proximity to
possibly Possibly.
followed.
Yeah, well, obviously then what followed is Villa take a goal kick and the ball goes up the other end and I think there's a miss kick from somebody. Nkapie reads it quite well and just sort of overruns it out for a throw-in. Yeah. I've seen him get quite a lot of...
It's another left-footed player on their right foot, basically.
I've seen him get
myself. I know how badly that can go. But.
I've seen him get quite a lot of criticism for that. And listen, I think you have to. If Villa get a throw in and they launch it into the box like Brentford or something, and then they score a goal, I think you can apply a bit more scrutiny to a moment of slight carelessness or miscontrol from a defender who'd actually carried out the defensive duties pretty well up until the point where he put it out for a throw. But, it came in. We got it clear. I think it's Timber who boots it clear. Maybe not quite that far. And then, of course, the ball comes back in. And after that, it's just...
I mean...
Oh, you know what? I'm just watching it again. Not that this will make anybody feel good. Is there like a handball from Tielemans?
Oh, God. Don't tell me that.
I'm looking at it again, and I saw it the other day, and I was going, I must make a note of that to ask James. As Tielemans controls it, it looks like it bounces up and hits his hand. I could be wrong, because I'm sure VAR will have looked at that, wouldn't they? They would.
So hang on. So I'm watching it now. So basically, the ball comes back. They get it into the box. Marlon lays it out. I guess that's Matty Cash who swings it across the box. It's actually a very good header back across goal by Jadon Sancho, I think, into a really dangerous area. David Raya makes the save. Mm-hmm. Is that from Tielemans?
No, Buendia. Oh, it is Tielemans, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one
is
of the...
Is that where the handball is?
No, the handball is in the build-up just after Timber...
Oh, I see. Right, back there.
Clears it.
Maybe it was far enough back that they didn't even look at it. I don't know.
Yeah, might have been. I'm just looking at it again. Maybe I'm just going to drive myself mad if I look at this.
I think for your own sanity, you may have to.
Maybe not. But listen,
I'm watching it back now. The part of the reason I'm watching it back is because I totally understand the criticism of Arsenal have got to clear their lines. But if I'm honest, when I watch it, I don't really see where that moment is. There's not a chance where ball's there and a player whiffs at it or scuffs it. Now, what I would say, to contradict myself, is maybe it's a little bit panicked from Arsenal. Maybe it's almost it's almost impressive the degree to which Arsenal players are kind of throwing themselves in the way of it. But is there a bit of a desperation in it that may let us down?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you can do in that situation as a defender, or when you're defending and the ball is nobody quite knows where the ball is.
Yeah.
And I'm having to watch Villa celebrations here. I'm turning that video off again.
My gut feeling after the game, and I think it's still the same today, is that if the bounce of the ball is slightly different, we are sort of heralding that as
heroic defending. Yeah, exactly.
Brave, heroic last-ditch defending.
Yeah, exactly. I think, listen, I think Villa got a little bit of a break. They just got the run of the ball at a key moment. I don't know that we did too much wrong in that scenario. Maybe Timber could clear it a bit further earlier on.
That is the chance, really.
That is the one where, exactly. Because then you can push out.
We speak about brave defending. It's brave attacking too. That's the thing. I mean, they went for it. They knew this is it. This is our chance. Close the gap to 3 points. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 men. Is that right? 1, 2, 3. 6 men in the box. No, 7 men in the box.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? In the 94th minute. If they get caught, they're in big, big trouble. So it was one of those moments where everybody kind of went all in and the cards fell in their favour. And to be fair to Buendia, He executes the finish well. And Sammy Kufor-esque ground thumping.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so hard to take, isn't it? It really makes you feel like throwing up a little bit, It
does, but, I think... it's a couple of days on now for a start. So I do think this was a very close game. Like a lot of Villa games and a lot of Emery games that we will all remember, it was quite end-to-end at times, as in there were chances certainly at both ends. There was an element of chaos to it. And Villa rolled the dice, so basically they came out in their favour. But I don't think there's any great... I don't think this was a particularly bad performance. And I think that... Funnily enough, I think Gary Neville said it quite well. You'd sort of expect him to be the first to jump on Arsenal at this opportunity, but he sort of... I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, when you play good teams, sometimes you'll lose. And it doesn't need to be a cause for panic.
No.
And I agree with that, really.
I think this is a league where, apart from one or two teams, pretty obvious teams, it's a league where, and I think this could be to our benefit, and I've said this, that if it's a closely contested title race, I think we've got a better chance of winning it. But this is a league where anybody can take points off anybody, right? Sunderland going to Stamford Bridge and winning, and Leeds taking points off Liverpool hilariously, and all the fallout from that. So I think sometimes you can analyse a game and say, did we play as well as we could? No. Are there reasons for that? Probably. The game against Chelsea, I think we win if we have Saliba and Gabriel. This game, we certainly don't lose if we have Saliba and Gabriel. Those are reasons and not excuses. But we also have been playing a lot of very intense games.
Yeah.
We have injury issues. Maybe there are questions, and we can deal with those in part two, about rotation and whether there's more the manager could do to keep people fresh. But,
does Christian Norgaard exist?
Does he indeed? Yeah, those kinds of things. But, I'd be more upset if we go to Villa Park and get beaten and I'm thinking, well, these guys didn't try. There was a lack of effort or a lack of commitment or something like that. Sometimes you lose games of football, and yesterday or on Saturday we lost it in a very heartbreaking and cruel way. I think maybe the schedule caught up with us a little bit. Maybe we couldn't manage those final few minutes because of fatigue or whatever it was. And it's really annoying and really frustrating, and nobody likes losing. But I also think it needs to be looked at in the bigger picture of, being the first defeat in 18 games is a really, really long and really impressive run. And I think as well, this is probably a scenario that, they're not ever going to plan for defeat, are they? But they will have talked about what happens when we lose a game. How do we react? How do we display our resolve? How do we display our character? I think what sort of feeds into this is a lot of external influence on how Arsenal are discussed, to be honest. Because a couple of weeks ago, well, the league is, not saying it's everybody. The league is Arsenal's. The pundits are saying it's Arsenal's to lose. We could be this many points clear. And it's still December, by the way. I thought Arteta was quite good afterwards, saying if anyone thinks we're going to be 10 points clear in December, you're living in a different world, which I think is absolutely right, But all of those sort of factors feed into how people react afterwards and how people feel about it. And the reality is when anybody at Arsenal is talking about the title, whether it's the manager or whether it's any of the players in the interviews that they do on Sky Sports and TNT and all of that kind of stuff, they've all been very much on message that there's a long way to go. We're in the title race, but we're not taking anything for granted. But I think there is this external idea that Arsenal fans and the club and the players and the manager are sort of, we're going to coast to this title and it's going to be a cakewalk and all that kind of stuff. And that's just not true. It couldn't be further from the truth. It was always going to be really difficult. There are always going to be days where it doesn't work, where you don't play, where you get sucker punch like this, where you stumble a little bit, and where I'm much more interested in seeing how we respond now, rather than sort of over-analysing a game that you could say Villa deserved to win, maybe, based on some of the chances. But, it happens. It happens. You can't be fucking brilliant all the time and you can't win every game. So where I'm more interested in sort of casting my own mind is to see what's the response now from Arsenal. What way do they react to this? How do they... I think Arteta said it was emotional, didn't he? He said it was touching emotionally, I think is what he said about the result. But again, it's that message of, okay, that hurt. Let's take that and start winning again. He says it will make us a better team. And that's what we need to see, right?
It is, yeah. It is. And I think actually the reaction to, the players' reactions at full time kind of sum up some of that discourse in that I saw, again, thank you, algorithm, fans of other clubs and certain pundits kind of seeing the anguish in those Arsenal players as evidence of Arsenal cracking up, right? Feeling the pressure, feeling the strain. Whereas actually, I actually think as Arsenal fans, we should be quite encouraged by that. I think it would have been much more concerning if that ball hits the net and shoulders just slump and heads go down and nobody says anything. I think the passion that you see and the pain that you see can both be really positive, motivating factors. And I think they are indicative of a team. I was talking with Amy Lawrence about this before we came on air this morning. Indicative of a team who are really sort of laser focused on their goal and recognise the stakes in every single moment of every single game.
Sure.
And that tallies with what we've seen until this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a way, nothing changes. I mean, realistically, to win the league, I'm not a statistician, but we can probably lose, somewhere between 4 and 6 games?
Yeah, they used to say 6 was the most, I think.
Right.
Maybe that's different. Yeah.
So we're 2 down, basically. We've lost 2 of our lives, as it were. But we're still very much top of the league, still in a very strong position, still got potentially the most favourable fixture list of any of the realistic contenders because of the tough away games we've already ticked off the list, and this is another one. So, disappointed, yes, but not too disheartened. And I think as well, you've got to look at when we have had setbacks this season. So Anfield, how we responded to that, an 18-game unbeaten run. Sunderland came back from the break in winning form. This team have shown already in this season, and that's without mentioning the countless responses to injuries that we've suffered. They have shown a resilience already, and to be honest, I expect them to continue to do that. And in terms of the Premier League, you mentioned, it's a competitive league with the exception of a couple of teams. We couldn't really wish for a more favourable fixture next weekend.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, there's a midweek one, and we might talk a little bit about that. But I do think, some people will put it down as like football supporter cope, But it's one of those where if someone offers you a scenario, those ones. If someone said this, if someone offered you that. But, if you're in early December, you've been to Anfield, Villa Park, Stamford Bridge, Old Trafford and St. James's Park, and you're top of the table by 2 points. You take that? Yeah, I think so.
I absolutely would. But equally, I do. And listen, people may tell me people may disagree, but I am sort of slightly finding it odd to look at that table and see the likes of City and Villa so close. When I think about the way we've played, how formidable we've looked at times this season, the results we've achieved, and I think about the lack of consistency that's kind of underscored those two teams' seasons. Is there any part of you that looks at it, it's like, God, wow?
No, not really.
After all that, it's only 2 points.
Well, what it might make me think is that, a defeat, as painful as it is, is a demonstration that it's not the end of the world, because Villa have lost games and Man City lost games. And to be fair, both of them had really indifferent starts to the season, Villa in particular. They've been on a brilliant run so far, but I think what we know about Unai Emery's teams is that those runs, they'll hit the bricks at some point, But it should be an indication to us, maybe as a way of dealing with the disappointment of losing a game, is that you're, particularly at this point of the season where there is time to react and there is time to go again and time to make up those points, that, we lost a game and it's fucking crap to lose a game, but we can see just basically means that you can lose games and it's not fatal to your title chances, because Villa have lost and look where they are, and City have lost and look where they are, and we've lost a game and we're still where we are, and it makes everything tighter and a bit more nerve-wracking and all the rest. But we have to be able to deal with defeat, and nobody was expecting another invincible season. So it's happened. React, move on, and take it from there. That's where I am with it.
Yeah, and I think realistically, after 15 games, you're only going to get so much variance in terms of points tallies, right?
23 games still to go. A big chunk of the season, the majority of the season, still ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the setbacks are inevitable. It is all about the response, really. So let's see what this week holds for us.
All right. Well, look, why don't we take a little break here, and we will come back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer the questions that you sent to us on Blue Sky at gunnerblog.bsky.social and at arseblog.com. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. You want to go first, or will I go first?
What about this? I saw Cal get asked this by Simon Collins the other day. I thought I'd put it to you. It's from Gabby Goal. And they ask, morning, gents. Do you think the club's terrible run of injuries will influence any January transfer business? I wasn't expecting any incomings due to the extensive summer transfers, but now I'm not so sure.
I don't think so. Unless there's like a real crisis, and I'm touching wood and keeping fingers crossed that that's not the case. I mean, we know Mosquera's going to be out for a while, right?
Weeks.
52
not days,
weeks.
But weeks.
52 weeks in a year. Yeah. Gabriel, a matter of weeks, Arteta said. Saliba should be back soon enough. We have Nketiah, we have Calafiori, we have Lewis Skelly, we have White, we have Timber. I just can't really see it unless there's an absolute emergency. In which case, I think they'd be looking at like a loan signing, and then you're questioning, right, who's available on loan that's any good in a title race. So I'd be really surprised if Arsenal did any January business. You?
I mean, I have very much been of the mind that, the work was done in the summer, and also that the money was spent in the summer. I can't imagine. I know that, for example, when they were looking, we've read reports, right, that when they were looking at the Eze deal, when they were looking at the Nketiah deal, transfers more toward the end of the window, I think a fair amount of sort of quite careful accounting had to go into making those deals viable. So I think that presents challenges. I wouldn't surprise me if Mikel sort of asked the question of the owners or pushes for something, because he always does. I mean, invariably he sees every window as a chance to get better, and I don't think he'll be shy about doing that again. So I think it comes down to whether there's the capacity, really, financially, and I don't know is my honest answer. But it wouldn't surprise me if it would prove pretty challenging to do and stay compliant with financial fair play and all those other factors. So, we might see one or two things. I mean, we saw obviously the Quintero twins signed the other day. I think the work that is going on in sort of recruiting younger players, developing players, will continue sort of semi-aggressively. It wouldn't blow my mind if there was another one of those, for example. But in terms of like a first team edition, I'd be a little bit surprised at this point in time.
Okay, what about this, given that we play Club Bruges in the Champions League on Wednesday night, and maybe these questions are related. There's a more specific one, or one general one here from Gunnar63.bsky.social. What are your ideas for rotation options this week in Europe? He also says, and the league, but I'm more interested in the European game. And then we have some questions about somebody you mentioned in the first half. Rowan Patel says, good morning, chaps. Christian Norgaard, talk to me. And Haider Javed, who's hj14.bsky.social, says, should we be questioning the Norgaard signing and Arteta's reluctance to use him? I feel we could have used his energy and defensive nous to protect the lead at Sunderland and the point at Villa. What is his role in the squad if we're overlooking his attributes when perhaps we need them most?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, I think. Do you remember we got a question a few weeks ago about how many games he'd start or something between now and Christmas? And you and I had a heated debate about whether it would be one or two, something like that. So I think the first thing I would say is the logic of the signing to me, as I kind of justified it to myself in the moment, was, well, Martin Zubimendi's coming in, and obviously there might be some adaptation there. We don't know how he'll fare in his first few months in English football. And actually, I think Zubimendi's excellence has been sort of has slightly rendered Christian Norgaard a little bit pointless, I would say, in that Zubimendi's played all the games and played them very, very well, and has needed almost no time to get up to speed or be bedded in. Norgaard also obviously had an injury at the start of the season, missed the first few weeks, which I think slowed his adaptation and his involvement. I think he has spoken as well. I might be wrong about this, but I think he has spoken about the change in coming from Brentford and needing to kind of come up to the level, even for an experienced pro like him, maybe even more so for an experienced pro like him, adapting to a maybe more demanding environment, maybe more tactically demanding, maybe more physically demanding, I think has been a process for him. So I think there's all kinds of explanations for like why we haven't necessarily seen a great deal of him. And I think the main one is that Zubimendi's been so good and so instrumental. Equally, I do kind of find myself thinking, like looking at it now, was that a good use of a spot in the squad? Like from a football business perspective, like could we have spent that money? You know, I see we're being linked with some younger midfielders ahead of January as Arsenal look to kind of, you know, evolve that group moving forward. Would we have been as good or better off even spending 10, 15 million on a 21-year-old who probably would have played the same amount of minutes but would have more potential moving forward, more market value moving forward. I think that's sort of an interesting kind of strategic discussion. But then my sort of conclusion with it is that that's not what Mikel Arteta and Andrea Berta wanted to do in this window.
No.
They didn't buy a 21-year-old centre forward. They bought a 27-year-old one. Predominantly, Mosquera is kind of the outlier.
Yeah.
Predominantly, they went for players who are oven ready, experienced, ready to step in and play their part immediately. And I guess that's why they opted for Norgaard.
Yeah, I guess because you're sort of talking about a player of the profile of Albert Sambi-Lokonga, for example. So we did try that.
Could you have done
Lokonga?
Yeah, is the debate, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you have to remember as well is that I think you're right about Zubimendi. Would there be an adaptation period? I wasn't too concerned that there would be, given his experience and his quality, and I think he's got up to speed very quickly. I think what they looked at was losing a lot of experience from midfield last summer. 2 veteran midfielders left, so they wanted to replace some of that. And I think we might get to the end of the season and say, actually, turns out this was a really good deal. He's come in, played a part, been important. So far, that hasn't been the case. He hasn't really played a great deal. I would expect and actually hope to see him in midweek against Club Brugge. Not taking anything for granted, but I do think there is an opportunity to provide some of the players who have played a lot this season a little bit of a rest. And I'm looking at Rice, I'm looking at Zubimendi, I'm looking at, well, where else are you looking? I think they're the main ones. They're the 2 in particular where I think you can play Norgaard, Waneri, Norgaard, Eze in midfield. I wouldn't have a problem with Odegaard starting this game. He's missed a lot of football, so we need to get him back and playing regularly and get him up to his rhythm. There are ways that he can rotate the squad and rotate the team for Tuesday, but I think it's important that Rice, I'm not saying, remember when Kai Havertz, was it the game against Wolves where he just sort of fell over at the end? He was so tired. Rice has sort of looked a little bit like that in the last couple of weeks because these stats are not publicly available, but I can't imagine there are too many players who since the last interlull have run further than him and run harder than him. So I'm looking at this game in particular as a way of resting Rice, give him a week off basically. And then you've got a decision to make. Do you need him against Wolves? Do you want him against Wolves? Those might be 2 very different things. But then I think there's a week, isn't there, between the Wolves game and the Everton game. So
very precious.
Yeah, off. So there is scope, I think, for some rotation in this game, particularly in midfield. Maybe not so much in defensive areas because we're short, but I mean, are you looking at Gyokeres starting this game against Club Brugge?
Yeah. I'll get on to him actually because I had a question about him. But just finishing up on Norgaard, I think what we've done is sort of explain the rationale of the signing, but I'm not sure it explains necessarily his absence from the selection.
Do you think game states have played a part? I think the only game that there are a couple of games I looked at recently where I thought, you know what, Bayern Munich and the North London derby, when you're 3-1 up and 4-1 up with 15 minutes to go, is that not a moment where you can say, we can take 15 minutes off Declan Rice here and 20 minutes off him there? Those are the only games. There are other games where I think, this game in particular, people are saying, well, why didn't you put Norgaard on? And we'd made 2 changes at halftime. We put Trossard on, then had to take him back off, right? Because of the fitness issue. I think that's what Arteta alluded to afterwards, wasn't it? That basically they put him on for as long as they could and then they took him off again because they didn't want to do him any more damage.
That. I mean, my feeling is like, because he came on at half-time and he went off on 86 minutes. Like, I find it hard to believe that he was okay to play 40 but couldn't have played 45. But I'm not a doctor.
Sure.
I think that was covering for the fact that he thinks Martinelli's a better defender, to be honest with you. That's
maybe so. So then he made a decision. He put Martinelli on and he put Lewis Skelly on for Calafiori. Calafiori picked up a yellow card. So I think, that was maybe common sense. So now there's no room for Norgaard in this game.
That's true. I mean, I think some people thought maybe Zubimendi was tiring. I think that's the thing, isn't it? We're talking about Zubimendi being integral from the start, but you don't want him to become a victim of his own success where he's having to play every minute and he gets exhausted. I think another interesting thing on Norgaard is just that we've spoken about the squad building and how deep the squad is and how in so many positions it feels like a toss-up, right? Like, Calafiori versus Lewis Skelly versus Nkapie, or Odegaard versus Eze, or Trossard, Martinelli, even Saka Madueke, or Havertz, Gyokeres, however you want to look at it. I do feel, without real respect for Norgaard, because I know he's a great pro and international player, there is a bigger gap in my mind between a Martin Zubimendi or a Declan Rice and a Christian Norgaard. And the price tags alone kind of tell that story.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Yeah.
And I think maybe that's where we see that gap. I think it explains Mikel Arteta's seeming reticence as well. I think he just thinks he's better served by having those first choice players on the pitch. But I agree that this week should be an exception in that. I mean, in fact, we had a question from AETX Burkamp Lover who said, how many teenagers should start on Wednesday?
2, maybe.
Really? It would be Ethan Ranieri?
Well, maybe Ranieri could start and maybe Lewis Skelly can start.
I mean, should it be big rotation, like wholesale rotation?
I don't think it will be wholesale rotation, but I think there's a sort of an idea, as you say, there's a lot of equilibrium, talent equilibrium, if that's what you want to call it, within the squad. So if it's Trossard or Martinelli, listen, Trossard's in better form, but, we're talking about players in the same ballpark. I think Saka Madueke is that's a bit more the other way for me. Bit more Norgaard, Zubimendi with Saka Madueke so far with him. But, if you want to...
Yeah, I was quite generous to Noni, I think. But there you go.
If you want to take minutes out of the legs of Saka and rest him up for, a home game against Wolves where you want him to really, really imprint himself on the game, that's a way of doing it. Marino's there. Odegaard is there. I think we'll see... I wonder about left back, actually, because Calafiori's suspended, isn't he, for the
Wolves game?
For the Wolves game after picking up that yellow. People asked, we had a question about whether it was deliberate. Did we think it was a deliberate yellow card? I can't find who it was.
It didn't occur to me at the time, but it's not crazy conspiracy theory. I can't remember what he got it for.
He was high in the Villa half, and they were about to take it down the right wing, and he just pulled the guy back. It was very cynical. But I think it was more just about preventing the attack than him going, aha, here is my chance to pick up the yellow card that will rule me out of the Wolves game.
Yeah. I don't he likes a booking, to be honest. So
he does.
I'd be inclined to think it's just like the others. I mean, actually, I would still play Miles Wednesday because I think Miles...
Give him some rhythm?
Yeah. He looks to me like a player lacking a bit of rhythm. And I think... Let's get him bedded in, playing alongside somebody else. Obviously, it won't be Gabriel centrally, will it? So I think I would give him that game. Ben White started 2 games in 3 days. So do you want to play Ben White again? I don't know.
Do you have any choice?
Well, unless you get Saliba back.
Yeah.
But even with Saliba, if there's any doubt, you're probably thinking save him, aren't you?
Yeah, save him for the league, so...
So it could be similar back 4. Yeah, I'd like to see changes in midfield. A change to the left side, you would imagine, left winger. And then, Gyokeres. Did I say I had a question?
You did.
I did say that. I think he'll start, by the way. Did I have one, though? I don't know if I did, actually. I saw one.
I've got one, which I thought was quite interesting, rather than being like completely focused on Gyokeres, because I saw quite a lot of discussion after the game. about him and about sort of the fact he didn't really have a big impact in the second half when he came on. And Trossard came on, had a big impact. Gyokeres, not so much. And I think, some people are a little concerned about that. But there was a question here, so maybe it's a wider discussion from Noling on the Discord. He says, Gyokeres and all the strikers that we were linked with / interested in, Sesko, Isak, Watkins, and he said maybe with the exception of Ekitike, who I'm not sure we were that interested in. He said, they're all struggling to varying degrees. Why do you think that is? Marino is having the best season of them all. So it's just as a wider discussion about the strikers that are finding it tough going in the Premier League this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think Isak and to a lesser extent Ekitike are sort of caught in the maelstrom that is Liverpool. I kind of feel like that is a bit of a mess, isn't it? I have thought about this quite a lot because obviously none of them have particularly set the world light. Even the one who looked like the sure thing in Isak. But I think my overriding feeling is that apart from Isak, it wasn't a particularly strong field. I'm not convinced. Arsenal had a problem going into the summer where they had to buy a striker. And I think they'd sort of given themselves that problem, really, by failing to do it in each of the previous 2 windows. But it sort of reached a point of critical mass where they had to buy a centre-forward. And that meant they had to make a choice from a relatively small pool of guys who looked like they might be a contender. And, we debated Sesko versus Gyokeres a lot. But there weren't... I don't think too many people were like, either of them are a certainty, either of them are a sure thing. I think there were debates to be had.
People were sort of in not one camp or the other, but there were certainly Sesko advocates and Gyokeres advocates and people in the middle.
There were lots of people who were sort of agnostic as well and like, well, we don't really know, which I think, to be honest, is the only sensible position to ever really take. Why have they all struggled? I think it's probably coincidence, but I do think that, it maybe wasn't necessarily like a particularly golden generation of strikers to be plucking from. I still think Isak's the best of the bunch, and I still think he will come good in some way, shape or form. Although, well, they're certainly having to wait for it.
They are. I mean, but maybe the bigger question is, from our perspective, is whether or not you think Gyokeres will come good is not maybe the right turn of phrase, but his start to the season, I think we talked about this a bit, where he was thrust in and played a lot and he's having to get used to a new team. And I think, when you talk about Christian Norgaard and his reference to having to go up a different level, I mean, that must apply just as much, if not more, to Viktor Gyokeres, in the sense that the Premier League and the defenders you face and the game, the way it's played tactically and the pace and physicality of the game is a real difference to the Portuguese league, right? So he's having to deal with that, and he's having to deal with an injury. And, I think with all due respect to him, I don't think he's the tidiest footballer you're ever going to see, the most technically brilliant footballer you're ever going to see. But that must be something Arsenal were well aware of when they made that decision, when they made the big decision on who to sign. And then the question becomes like, what is their plan to get the best out of Gyokeres with all that information that they had when they decided they were going to sign him?
Yeah, and by the way, on that list of strikers and who aren't really performing as expected, you can add Ollie Watkins, who was another.
I think he said
didn't move.
Yeah, he did say Watkins, I think, in the question.
Watkins, yeah. Okay. Who's had a really tough season as well. I think playing up front in the modern game is actually very difficult. I think that's one thing. On Gyokeres, in his defence, he's coming back from injury. I always remember that Sol Campbell quote from Arsene Wenger about how he was a big machine and it used to take him longer than certain other players to kind of get fluidity, to get rhythm. I think the same, having watched sort of the start of Gyokeres' season and then seen him improve somewhat, may be true for him. He was a bit unfortunate to get injured at Burnley in the midst of what was actually maybe his best performance, one of his better performances, certainly. And so perhaps there's an element of sort of trying to rediscover that rhythm. I think this week will help. Wouldn't surprise me if he started both games. Certainly think he'll start in Bruges. I think he's got a good chance for the weekend against Wolves as well. Those are games where I think he would be optimistic of getting himself a couple of goals, and that can do wonders for a player's confidence and subsequently performance levels. But I would also be lying if I didn't say I had some concerns and some reservations. I do think that he is he looks quite a sort of blunt force instrument at this point in time. And there'll be times where there's a need for that. But is that what Arsenal need game in, game out? I'm not so sure.
Well, look, it's a big week for him, I think. You know, if he does start Bruges and he does start Wolves, these are the games where, you know, there was talk about him, you know, and not something I subscribe to necessarily, but the talk about him being a bit of a flat track bully and how that was actually something Arsenal needed, right?
Exactly.
You know,
picture could look very different.
Exactly, you know, but it is one of those weeks where I think there is a bit of spotlight on him. So hopefully he can come through and grab a couple of goals over the course of this week and not win over the hearts and minds, but certainly convince people that, you know, there's a job that he can do in this team. Can I just ask one more while we're sort of talking about strikers? I thought this was quite interesting. Finn P. Madden on the Discord, he said, "Morning, gents. How realistic is it to expect Gabriel Jesus to get some meaningful minutes this season with Havertz out for another few weeks, Gyokeres not exactly pulling up trees, and Marino needing some rest at some stage? Is there any chance Jesus could be leading the line for us in this busy festive period?"
Yeah. I think I sent you a text at was it 12:30 on Saturday night?
Yes.
After the Villa game.
I woke up and saw it on Sunday morning. I was going...
Had a few drinks and I texted you at 1 a.m. being like, I wonder what Gabriel Jesus is looking like.
Yeah.
Which probably tells you where I'm at with Gyokeres, to be honest. But I kind of feel like it's such a... Gabriel Jesus is such a delicious idea, right? Because he's so talented and was so good when he first came in. And I hesitate to repeat this because I don't want to build an unfair degree of expectation, but I have heard, he's looking very sharp in training. You know, all the same things we've heard before. And I would really dearly love for him to come back and have a sort of sustained impact on this team. But just have to offer all the usual caveats around physicality, injury. And remember as well that prior to his injury and prior to his kind of briefly bursting into life in 2 games against Crystal Palace, he had quite a protracted period, if I recall correctly, where he had looked way, way, way off it. So the mind and the memory plays tricks.
Sure.
You know, I remember the hat-trick against Crystal Palace, but I don't remember the anonymous substitute appearances, the countless anonymous substitute appearances and times where we were like, my God, you know, this guy done, basically. I think like all Arsenal fans, I am susceptible to the charms of Gabriel Jesus, and I hold out hope that he can be a contributor, but I just have, you know, partly to protect myself emotionally, I have to add all the usual caveats. What about you?
It'd be a lovely thing to have him available, I have to say. You know, even for 15, 20 minutes here or there, I think there's there's a range of abilities when you look at our forward options. If you're looking at our centre forward options, and it's Kai Havertz and it's Viktor Gyokeres and Mikel Merino, I think Gabriel Jesus. I think Jesus has something that none of the others have. Right?
That is definitely true.
You know, so as an option, it would be great to have him. I can't say, you know, who knows? He's been out for nearly a year now, because it was January of this year when he got that injury, and he's been out for a long time. On the one hand, you would say that could be very detrimental. On the other, he could be a guy who's absolutely out to make up for lost time and to make up for, you know, the pain and the frustration of being out injured for that long. You know, for a footballer, it's really tough, isn't it? You know, they all want to play all the time, and to miss out on the match day dressing room and getting ready and, you know, all of those things which, you know, are just sort of meat and drink for a footballer. I think there might be something there that comes out in the performances as and when or if we see him back on the pitch. So I will keep fingers crossed that that's the case.
He played behind closed doors, didn't he? I think
against Man United, yeah.
Against Man United, alongside Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, no less.
Why is Alex Oxlade? I mean, why is he?
Is he going to follow in the footsteps of Sol Campbell and Mathieu Flamini in earning a contract? That's the January signing, Andrew. Would you be taking Gabriel Jesus to Bruges? I think surely this is a great opportunity to take him. And
absolutely. I mean, you get the 12-man bench, don't you, in Europe?
Yeah.
So
wouldn't start him, but I'd have him involved.
Oh, absolutely. If there were minutes to be played, and if this is part of the plan, playing him in the behind closed doors game to see A, how he reacts, and B, to get some minutes into his legs so he can actually step up and play again, then yeah, bring him. And if we're in a position where this game is safe with 20 minutes to go, bring him on and let him get back and enjoy himself. And who knows, if it's a case where this is a game where we need a goal in the last 20 minutes, he's got the record. Mm-hmm. You know, he's got a track record of scoring goals, probably not as many as you would have liked, but when you look at the bench and you look at who we might bring off the bench and who's capable of making an impact, he would certainly be high up there, wouldn't he? So
Definitely.
I think it's your question.
It's my question. But this is a non-football, but I thought I would ask it. Burkamp's Pixel said, can you ask Blogs to explain why his voice is ubiquitous across Ireland during December? And he says, it is for a good cause, after all.
The reason my voice is ubiquitous across Ireland and across the whole world at christmasfm.com is because I do all the voiceover stuff for Christmas FM, which is a Christmas music radio station, which is operated out of Dublin. A friend of mine, Dara, is the guy in charge there. So I've done the voiceovers for them every year, free of charge, because it's a sort of voluntary thing, and they raise a hell of a lot of money every year for great charities, you know, for homeless charities. I think this year, maybe the last year as well, it's a range of children's charities. I think maybe last year they raised 450,000 euros. So it's a lot of money. And if you're into Christmas music, which I am not, you know, that's what you want. Dara's always saying to me, do you want to do a show? Come out and do a show on Christmas FM. I was going, I'd rather fucking nail my feet to the floor and watch Maroon 5 than play Christmas music. I just can't do it. But I'm very happy to contribute the voiceovers to Christmas FM.
Okay, great. I quite like Christmas music. At least I like it sort of like, I like the mood that it puts me in, you know, so maybe I will tune in and donate. Okay. You had a question about like...
Oh, yeah.
Fans or...
Yeah, there was a lot of reaction, and I feel like... I don't ever want to tell anybody how they should feel or how they should think, right? There is a range of reaction to a game like the one we played against Aston Villa. And people are entitled to react and behave however they want. So that's that. I didn't want to make it like a referendum on fandom or anything like that. But the question came from the Robinator, He said, "Morning, gents. I've since calmed down after the final whistle, but I spent most of the weekend frustrated, irritated, and annoyed. My wife asked, 'Why is this one bothering you so much?' I didn't have an answer. I know expectations are incredibly high, but I couldn't come up with a logical answer as to why I was so irritated and why I couldn't put my finger on what was the make or break factor in the loss. Maybe you guys can assist. Is it simple fatigue? Is it Emi Martinez's stupid face? Please help me make some sense of this." And there was a sort of question which probably goes along with this one, comes from Flanny Balls on Blue Sky, who simply says, "Did God put Unai Emery on this earth specifically to inflict cruelty on Arsenal fans?"
I mean, I do think that probably adds something to it, doesn't it? It's an extra twist of the knife, the involvement of Unai and Emi. Not that I detect huge bad blood from the Arsenal fans collectively towards Unai, but you never want your former manager to get one over you, do you?
No.
Emi is a different case. But I think, it's just a really painful way to lose a game. And I think the reason that it stings so much and the reason we've seen such an outpouring of reaction is because there's real stakes involved. There is a lot of expectation and consequently a lot of pressure. I keep thinking about when we were 1-0 up against Brentford in the week and the stoppage time board went up. And it said 6 minutes. And I heard the crowd at Emirates Stadium do something I've never heard before, where they all in unison went, 6! Like that. And I keep thinking about that and being like, wow, people are really invested, but really on edge. And although until perhaps this weekend, the progress of the team has really been relatively serene, I think it is kind of underscored by this quite deep-seated tension. That's a really tricky balance for a football club, I think, to stay focused on the here and now, to keep just trying to win football matches one at a time, while there is this sort of snowballing sense of expectation and pressure that you've got to deliver. And I think that's a really tricky kind of balancing act for Mikel Arteta to sort of kind of keep all that, because it will be the same in the dressing room. And I think we see that at full time, or when Buendia scores, we see some of that pressure, that tension coming out of people. I think it's really hard to manage that, and it's not just the run-in. The run-in's maybe when it's most intense and most difficult, but it goes on for months, and you've got to kind of keep it on the boil without it bubbling over. It's tough.
I mean, I just think it's just a collection of factors, and the sort of platform for it is finishing second 3 years in a row and coming close, and that desperation to go one better this time around. Right? That's the sort of underpinning of everything this season, where as a fan base, we are desperate to win the league because we know we probably should, if that's the right way of putting it. Which isn't to sort of sound entitled or anything, but we've developed the team, we've built the team, we've come really close, we've demonstrated the quality and the capacity to be in a title race. And now is the time, after more investment in the summer, that we should go on and win the league, right? So that's what underpins everything. And then I think in particular, the manner of defeat to Villa, the fact that Villa and Unai Emery seem to have not a hoodoo over us, but, have had a good record against us and have inflicted some pain on us in recent seasons. The former player thing is there. The fact that you're looking at Man City closing the gap. And I think what it is a response to, imagine a crazy situation, right, where Arsenal right now are sitting 12 points clear of everybody in the Premier League. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there would be serenity and calm and, people just saying, this is it. Yeah, don't worry about a thing. I think it will be like this all season. And look, some of the responses, as ever, go too far, right? That's just the normal way of online reaction, particularly if you're, on Twitter and that kind of stuff, where I think, you don't get the best of people or the best out of people, when they react to things like this. And as I said, everybody's entitled to react the way they want and behave the way they want. But I think even with the context of this being only our second defeat in the league this season, at the end of an 18-game unbeaten run, it just makes people afraid. I think that's what it is. It's like a fear response in some ways. And that then fear leads to the dark side, doesn't it? Fear leads to anger, leads to the dark side. That's it. So I think it's just this cocktail, which will be part of what we have to deal with all season long. Everything that doesn't go 100% perfectly is going to be scrutinized and analysed and debated and discussed, and there's just sort of no real escape unless you actually escape, turn things off and don't read things and don't let yourself get annoyed by this pundit or that pundit or those reactions, which is, within our capabilities of doing as well, in as much as we can, given that we have to sort of do what we do.
Is it, though, Andrew? Is it?
Well, listen, I didn't read it. It is hard, but, I didn't watch any post-match reaction. I didn't read any interviews. I didn't read any match reports. I didn't go and see what people were chatting about too much online. Obviously, I have to write about it. I have to, chat with people, on the arses, on Arseblog.com and on Blue Sky and those kinds of things. And for the most part, I think, those discussions, while rooted in the kind of fear that I've been talking about, have been pretty reasonable. So it's the sort of external, the really, really external voices or noise that I can block out pretty well, which I'm thankful for.
Thank goodness for that.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, I agree with all of the above.
Right.
Shall we leave it there? Move on?
I think so. Move on, react, start winning games of football again, get ourselves 12 points clear at the top of the table, then shit ourselves at every available moment, just because that is what happens when you're in a title race. Like if this was, like, you said it though, like stakes are high. Stakes is high.
You're so right though. Like, what's more frightening than having a 6-point lead overturned, having a 12-point lead?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they couldn't, could they? Well, watch.
Yeah, exactly.
All right,
never live it there.
Well, look, it hasn't been a great week in the Premier League this weekend. Most of the results were not favourable, but there's still plenty going on. So you can join us over on Patreon a bit later on. For the 30, myself and Phil will be discussing all the weekend's Premier League action. Quite a bit going on at Liverpool, James, it seems.
Quite a bit. Yes.
Quite a bit. So that could be fun to get into. You can join us at patreon.com/Arseblog for that. For now, though, take it easy and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.